Today, we're talking about the 6 types of homes you shouldn't buy in Moscow, Idaho. Not generic tips, but 6 Moscow-specific mistakes I see people making all the time. Homes in Moscow can be particularly tricky. That's why I made this video. I want you to be prepared, not scared. I'm going to help you avoid problems that could cause you major buyer's remorse or cost you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. Watch this video before you fall in love with that listing, because the home you're looking at might just fall into one of these categories. If you're new to the channel, I'm Chris Carpenter. I've lived in Moscow for over a decade, and I'm a real estate agent who walks through these homes every week. There are 6 homes to avoid, and we'll go through each one. To start with, we'll look at certain pockets of town that have a risk which can blindside owners if they don't know about it, and why owning a home in these areas can cost you thousands of dollars out of pocket. There's real gold throughout, so stick around. Unlike the problem in the second part of this video, flooding in Moscow is rare, but its rarity is exactly why it can be a problem. I bought a duplex over on Kenneth Street here in Moscow. We lived in it for a bit, then converted it to a rental. It backs up to Paradise Creek. I thought that was cool. And the house was far enough back from the creek such that we didn't need to pay flood insurance. I thought I was safe. Well, every 3 to 5 years in the late winter or springtime, often when there's a big snow and then it burns off quickly, Paradise Creek floods. And the backyard of this property is pretty flat, so when the water gets over the creek bank, it's coming to the house pretty quickly. The most recent time I got a call from our tenant about 9 p.m. on a Sunday night that the creek was about halfway across the yard. So I had to throw on my work clothes and head down to the city shop, fill up some sandbags to barricade the door and keep the water out. Not exactly how I planned to spend my Sunday night. As of August 2025, we've seen 3 big flooding events with a number of smaller ones in between. One in 1996, the 2019 near record flooding, and another near record flooding in early 2025. No surprise, but the same streets keep showing up, the ones near creeks that run through town. So, quick rule, if a creek is nearby, you need to check before you write the offer. Most standard homeowners policies do not cover flood damage. That's a separate flood insurance policy that costs extra money. And if you don't know where Moscow's flood zones are, you won't know you need flood insurance until you're in the middle of buying the home and the mortgage company requires it. If the home you're interested in lands in a certain flood zone classification, that can send up a warning flag to the lender and end up costing you more in your monthly payment. There's something that buyers can do about it, which can bring your monthly payment back down, but put a pin in that and I'll come back to it in a moment. There's a great online resource where you can check flood zones for yourself. I'll link it down in the description so you can check it out, courtesy of the Idaho Department of Water Resources. It makes it super simple to find out if the property that you're looking at is in a flood zone or not. You can just type in the address right into the search bar. When you click a specific area on the map, you'll want to double check the section that says FLD zone. If you see AE, that means a 1% annual chance flood zone, a 100-year floodplain. That label can trigger a lender requirement for flood insurance. If you see Zone X, that's outside the AE floodplain, but it doesn't mean zero risk. It means lower mapped risk. Now, finding out that a home is in a flood zone isn't necessarily a deal breaker in Moscow. Remember, I said that there's something a buyer can do to help bring their monthly expenses back down. Well, it's also a good way to ensure that a home is perfectly safe even if it's in a flood zone. An elevation certificate is a survey document that shows how high the important parts of a house sit compared to the expected flood level of that area. It's created by a licensed surveyor or engineer. Insurers use it to price your flood policy. If your finished floor is higher than the mapped flood level, your premium can drop, sometimes by hundreds per year. As a buyer, if the property is in a mapped high-risk zone, request an existing elevation certificate from the seller or their insurer. Sometimes the city or county permit records have a copy too. If none exists, order one. A local surveyor can usually complete it in a few days or a couple weeks, depending on their access, but expect several $100s for the survey. Once you have the elevation certificate in hand, share it with your insurance agent. They'll requote the flood premium using the certificate's elevations. If the finished floor is above the base flood elevation, the premium often drops. So when you like a house near a creek, run the Idaho Department of Water Resources map before a second showing and screenshot the results. If the lot is in the mapped high-risk zone, ask for an elevation certificate or budget time and money to get one. Get a real flood quote early using the certificate's numbers, and you can save yourself a decent amount of money and a whole lot of peace of mind. Now, mitigation still helps, especially if you choose to proceed without confirming with an elevation certificate. In those cases, a sump pump and having sandbags on hand can go a long way. Next, we'll hit the most common issue I see in Moscow homes, especially the charming historic ones everyone wants, and the 30-second checks you can do during a showing to spot it. If there's one category that creates more buyer's remorse in Moscow, it's older homes that hide age-related problems under fresh paint. They look charming at the showing, but the bills and fixes show up after closing. I'm going to have you run 3 quick tests during your showing to identify a couple of the most common old house problems and then explain what's going on in each of them. Test 1, pop into the attic access if it's safe, sniff. A sweet musty or laundry detergent smell is a red flag. Scan the underside of the roof deck with a flashlight. Dark spotting or frost in cold weather points to trapped moisture, which could pose a health risk. Test 2, find a bathroom fan and dryer. Do their ducts exit outdoors, or do they disappear into the attic? A lot of 1970s and 1990s homes in Moscow vented into the attic by default. That steam condenses on the cold wood and nails, again injecting moisture into your attic. And this compounds with the problems you're looking for in the first test. Test 3, bring a tennis ball and drop it on the living room floor. If it rolls or you feel a sway when you cross the room, you need a closer look at framing and foundation settling before you get serious. So here's what's going on. Homes built in the 1970s and 1990s often combine tighter interior with poor attic ventilation and fans dumping air into the attic. Over time, that loads the sheathing with moisture and can lead to mold. And mold is a serious health risk. The fix is straightforward. Run the ducts outside, add proper baffles, balance soffit and ridge vents, and then get it remediated. But you want to know before you write the offer, not after you move in. More good news on this, unless the mold is accompanied by serious rotting, it doesn't have to be a deal breaker because often you can negotiate remediation with the sellers. As you probably guessed, the tennis ball is meant to give you an early sense of foundation or settling issues. It's not a definitive test, but I definitely recommend having a professional take a closer look at the framing and foundation to be sure you have no serious cracks and warping that's going to cost you lots of money to correct later. And there's more to look out for with older homes. Older systems, for example, can be an issue for your budget. Knob and tube wiring is still seen in some Moscow homes. It's an older electrical wiring that runs through ceramic knobs with no grounding. It can be safe when it's in good condition and untouched, but it's often spliced or buried under insulation. Aluminum branch wiring from the late 60s and 70s can overheat at connections. Now, I've owned a home with knob and tube wiring and talked to electricians, and honestly, I think it's not as big of a deal as it's pumped up to be. But regardless, either vintage electrical system can raise extra insurance questions and panel work. Galvanized steel plumbing is another one. These are steel pipes that rust from the inside out and result in low flow and leaks. Polybutylene is a gray plastic pipe used mostly in the 80s and 90s that's prone to failure at fittings. And we see some older sewer lines made out of clay, which, as you can imagine, can crack and often see root intrusion. And there's nothing worse than finding out you've got a leaky sewer pipe after closing. The reason I bring these things up is because repiping is a big ticket item. And Moscow has a ton of 90s and older homes. These are things that are more common to run into than you might think. And one that is even easier to miss because it won't necessarily show up on an inspection is insulation and door or window sealing. This is especially prevalent in the historic homes you find in the center of Moscow. Those small gaps and subpar insulation can crank your winter bills up and create condensation where you can't see it. So if you're set on a historic Moscow home, While you're doing your walkthrough, feel for drafts around the windows and the front door. Or you can ask for the utility bills for the last 12 months and look for spikes during the winter. But what if you love the house anyway? I've purchased homes with poor roofs, asbestos insulation, knob and tube wiring, mold in the attic. I've purchased almost all of them. The main thing is knowing what you're getting into so you can account for it in either the purchase price, credits from the seller, having the work done by the seller prior to closing, or just in your own savings. And then you need the connections, particularly if you're new to town, to have the work done well. All contractors, electricians, and mold remediation companies are not created equal. So make sure to get good recommendations. If your heart is absolutely set on an older place in Moscow, let me know, because I'm happy to get you connected with the best in the area. This is my personal number, so you can call, text, email, or scan the QR code. I or my team are happy to help you navigate the historic home purchase dangers and point out the solvable things as well as the things that you won't want to deal with. Even if the inside looks spotless, the ground can tell a different story. Foundations, the simple perimeter checks to do after a rain, and the signs that mean it's time to bring in a specialist. Moscow's soil and seasons work together in ways that can silently move a house over time. Two things are hard on foundations here: expansive clay that swells when wet and shrinks when dry, and freeze-thaw cycles that nudge slabs and walls season after season. Add poor drainage or a hillside lot, and small issues can grow faster than you'd expect. If it just happens to rain before you're showing, that's actually a great opportunity to do some simple checks on the property. Soil should slope away from the foundation of the home on all sides. Pooling water is a great way to see if it truly does or not. If it slopes toward the house or you see puddles against the wall, water is loading the soil where you don't want it to and can be seeping into the basement or crawl space. You also want to look up, then down. Do downspouts discharge right at the base of the foundation, or are they properly routed away from the home? Extensions are cheap, but saturated clay right next to your foundation can cause expensive problems. This one is a big one. Scan the walls. On brick or block, stair-step cracks are a major red flag. Similarly, interior drywall, diagonal cracks from window, door corners, and doors that suddenly rub are common clues to some foundation shifting and settling. That last one, seeing stair-step cracking on masonry, interior cracks that keep returning after patching, or doors that stick with seasonal changes or after storms, that's your cue to bring a specialist for assessment. And something I want you to keep in mind: homes can present zero problems in some seasons and bigger problems in others. We bought a triplex as an investment property in the middle of the summer, and it had some deferred maintenance, but looked pretty good. Well, when spring rolled around, we found standing water on the windowsills, black mold growing around it. We ended up having to tear out a lot of the drywall, chasing the mold around so that we could fully remediate it. At this point, it's essential to take a step back and pay attention not only to the home, but the setting around the home. The next danger we're going to tackle has a different kind of cost that you only notice after move-in. Noise isn't obvious at a midday showing, but after move-in, it's a soundtrack of your life. The fastest way to see it in Moscow is to look at the traffic volumes map together, which I actually have pulled up right here, and we'll look at it here in a moment. When buyers are looking at properties, often they're focused on the house, the features, the inside, the yard, the space, those types of things. Unless they're really focused on it or sensitive to it, noise only really becomes a topic of conversation if it's loud enough to break their focus on looking at the house. It's not until after they make the purchase that they realize, oh, I'm actually on a pretty noisy street, so that's what I'm looking to help you avoid. So looking at this map, starting from the west side, working our way to the east, obviously Highway 8 coming in from Pullman has a lot of highway noise. There's not a lot of residential homes over there. It's primarily commercial. And that converts at Main Street. Now, we're actually gonna talk about this section and a few others like it next. 3rd Street, It's still somewhat busy around East City Park, but much less busy than the highway. The highway running from north to south, Highway 95, is busy, it's loud, but there's not a lot of residential homes on that road. Looking at more of the residential neighborhoods, we have a few primary streets with quite a bit of traffic and noise. 6th Street is a main thoroughfare through the neighborhoods of town. From west to east, it connects Main Street all the way over to Mountain View Road. Running north to south, Blaine Street and Mountain View Road are higher trafficked roads, louder, and homes on those streets definitely notice it. Mountain View is the main thoroughfare on the east side of town. It's kind of the outdoor recreation corridor. It's got neighborhoods on either side to the west and the east, so there's a lot of people coming into Mountain View and both driving north and south to do different things. D Street is also a main thoroughfare from west to east on the north side of town, and it also is super close to Moscow Middle School, so depending on the time of day, it can get pretty busy. Looking at these numbers, I would probably say anything over 4,000, maybe even 3,500, you definitely recognize the traffic and the noise that it brings. Your street isn't something that you can negotiate. Location is fixed. The only way to get a different street is with a different house. So if traffic noise is a deal breaker for you, you can either avoid these areas in Moscow entirely or visit during commute times, 7 to 9 a.m. or 4 to 6 p.m., and see if you can handle the noise or not. Next, we'll look at affordable housing in Moscow, specifically mobile homes. And it's not a problem with the mobile homes themselves that we'll talk about. We've got some genuinely good mobile homes in the area, and the purchase price can look great, but it's a different cost that has jumped up by 101% in some cases between 2023 and 2025. One of the reasons you might be thinking about a mobile home in Moscow is that Moscow's home prices are much higher than you'd expect in a fairly rural town of 26,000 people. Mobile homes can look like the most affordable path into Moscow, but the real cost isn't the purchase price, it's the space you rent. And you really do have to be careful about this one. Back in 2023, most of our parks were picked up in corporate acquisitions. Some parks saw lot rents jump ranging from roughly 40% up to 101%, plus added utility and administrative fees. The home itself didn't change, but your monthly budget sure did. So we now have lot rents ranging from $600 to $1,000 per month, when previously they were anywhere from $350 to maybe $700 per month. I'm suspicious that lot rent increases aren't done either. If you do end up going with a mobile home, just be sure to go in with both eyes wide open. Run the true monthly numbers, add up your lot rent, utilities, fees, insurance, and loan, and that's your real number. You can also ask whether the lease has any caps or formulas for annual rent increases. A great purchase price doesn't help if the lot rent jumps after you move in. This last one is the most rare thing you'll find in Moscow. They don't show up often, but when they do, limited disclosures and vacancy risks can turn what looks like a deal into an unwelcome surprise. Foreclosures are the rarest thing you'll find in Moscow. As of August 2025, Idaho's foreclosure activity is low statewide, and Latah County sees very few bank-owned listings. But if one does pop up, you see the deal and you want to go for it, there's an Idaho-specific factor that you need to know about before you rush in. Two realities to know upfront. Under Idaho's Property Condition Disclosure Act, post-foreclosure sellers like banks or court-ordered sales are often exempt from the standard disclosure form. In plain English, you may get little or no history. And second, empty houses don't babysit themselves. Frozen or burst pipes, roof leaks that went unnoticed, pets, vandalism, or strip fixtures are all unpleasant surprises that can and do happen. And from my experience with foreclosures, you rarely get to walk through them to see the actual condition before actually purchasing the property. All these can complicate things further because some loan programs won't fund your purchase until utilities are active and the property meets basic habitability standards. You now have a Moscow-specific checklist for 6 types of homes you'll want to be wary of and some practical tips for identifying issues without buying them first. If you ever want a second set of eyes or just want to talk through a specific listing, call, text, email, or scan the QR code. My team and I know the area really well and are here to help you catch risk and spot value. For even more info about Moscow and what it's like to live here, check out either of these 2 videos. They'll be helpful too.